Amma sat across from Kojo at the small breakfast table in their Accra apartment, the morning sun streaming through the kitchen window. She had just poured herself a cup of coffee and was about to take a bite of her bread when Kojo casually said, "You're lucky I married you. Not everyone would put up with you." The words hit her harder than she expected. For a moment, the spoon trembled in her hand, and the chatter in the room faded. Their relatives, who had come over for the weekend, paused mid-conversation, sensing the tension. Amma smiled, the kind of polite smile that hides everything you're feeling inside, but her stomach churned. It wasn't the first time Kojo had said something like this, yet it cut deeper today. She felt a mix of shock and hurt, but also something else, a small, flickering fire deep in her chest. It was the kind of spark that tells you not to stay quiet, not to accept being diminished, even by someone you love. Her mind replayed other moments, little jabs and dismissals over the years, the ones she had brushed off to keep the peace. Amma finished her coffee, nodding at a joke someone made at the table, laughing lightly even though she didn't feel like it. Inside, however, she made a silent promise to herself. She wouldn't let this comment define her. It was just a moment, but it would be the start of something bigger, a realization that her worth wasn't tied to anyone's approval, and that she was ready to take control of her own story. Amma often remembered the early days of her consulting firm in Kumasi, the long nights spent drafting proposals, negotiating contracts, and building relationships with clients who trusted her expertise. She had started small, with barely enough savings to cover the first month's rent for her office, yet her ideas and determination quickly set her apart. Within a few years, her firm was thriving, attracting major clients from across Ghana. She loved the work, the challenge, the sense of creating something that was hers. Yet, despite her clear success, recognition at home was scarce. Kojo rarely acknowledged her accomplishment. Instead, he framed her achievements as if they depended on his support. "I'm just helping you," he would say, shrugging when she shared a win. Even at family gatherings, when relatives praised her work, he would subtly downplay it, steering conversations back to his own career or framing her victories as lucky breaks. The sting of being undervalued by someone she loved cut deeper than any professional challenge. Her relatives, though well-meaning, sometimes fell into the same pattern. Questions like, "Does Kojo approve of your clients?" Or, "How does he help you manage all this?" made her feel as if her efforts were never fully hers. Every compliment she received felt like it had a shadow, someone always reminding her that her achievements weren't entirely her own. Amma carried these small but persistent disappointments with her. She would sit in her office late at night, thinking back to moments when she had exceeded expectations, solved problems no one else could, and grown her business in ways people told her were impossible. And yet, at home, those accomplishments were invisible. Kojo's dismissive comments and the subtle undermining from others wore on her, chipping away at her confidence in quiet ways. Despite the frustration, Amma never let it stop her. She kept pushing, proving her skills in the boardroom, on the phone with clients, and in meetings where her ideas drove real results. She knew that no one else needed to validate her, even if the people closest to her couldn't see the full picture. Still, the emotional toll lingered, the quiet sadness of being overlooked, the anger of being underestimated, and the determination that one day, she would show that her success was entirely hers. It was this mix of pride, frustration, and unspoken resolve that shaped Amma. Every dismissal, every minimized achievement, became fuel for something greater. Deep down, she knew that the time would come when her worth could no longer be ignored, when her voice and vision would demand attention. And she was ready for that moment. That night, Amma couldn't sleep. The house was quiet, the soft hum of the ceiling fan the only sound as she sat at her desk in the dim light of her home office. She opened her laptop and started scrolling through old emails, contracts, and project files from the past few years. Each document reminded her of deals she had closed, strategies she had crafted, and clients she had convinced to trust her vision. Every achievement was hers, built with her sweat, her ideas, her persistence. Yet at home, it was as if none of it mattered. She remembered the countless times Kojo had brushed off her successes. When she landed a big client, he'd smile politely and say, "I'm proud of you," but add, "I just help you, that's all." When she closed a deal worth millions, he would mention how she was lucky to have him supporting her. And those comments weren't just occasional. They were constant, small reminders that her brilliance was invisible in his eyes. Even when friends and family praised her, he would subtly undercut her achievements, making it seem like she couldn't have done it without him. The memories stung, but instead of breaking her, they ignited something inside her. Amma leaned back in her chair, thinking about all the late nights she had spent strategizing, negotiating, and building her firm from the ground up. She remembered how she had turned risky opportunities into successes, how her innovative solutions had impressed clients and competitors alike, and how she had carried the weight of responsibility while still managing to grow her business. Each memory was a reminder of her own power, a quiet but undeniable proof that she didn't need anyone to validate her. That night, as she closed another email outlining a major contract she had secured without any fanfare at home, a plan began to take shape in her mind. She wasn't thinking about revenge. She wasn't planning to humiliate Kojo or make him feel small. What she wanted was her own space, her own recognition, her own authority, something she had always deserved but had been denied. She wanted to step fully into her power, to show herself, and eventually the world, that she was unstoppable on her own terms. She stayed at her desk for hours, sketching ideas, making notes, imagining possibilities. Each thought fueled her determination. The spark that had flickered earlier that morning now burned brighter. By the time she finally leaned back and rubbed her tired eyes, she knew one thing clearly: nothing would hold her back anymore. Alma was ready to reclaim her voice, her achievements, and her place in the world, quietly, strategically, and powerfully. Alma's days and nights became a blur of calls, video conferences, and carefully drafted proposals. She had started talking to a multinational investment firm in Lagos quietly, using contacts she had built over the years. She knew that she couldn't afford to let anyone in her circle, especially Kojo, get wind of what she was planning. The deal had to be hers alone, a way to assert her independence and expand her business in ways people had doubted she could. Every meeting was strategic. She highlighted her firm's track record, her unique understanding of the West African market, and the innovative solutions she had developed for her clients. She had spent years building relationships with other businesses, governments, and stakeholders, and now she leveraged those connections, showing the investors that she had access and influence that few others did. She carefully framed each proposal to show not just potential profits, but also the long-term impact her ideas could create. Alma spent nights refining financial models and projections, making sure every number was airtight. She structured the deal as a $100 million joint venture, one that could transform the consulting landscape. She knew the significance of the figure, big enough to command respect, but realistic enough to be achievable. Every clause, every detail was considered carefully. She anticipated questions, prepared answers, and imagined every possible objection, ensuring she would come across confident, informed, and unstoppable. Her focus was absolute. She blocked out distractions, even putting her phone on silent during crucial calls. She juggled the negotiations alongside running her firm, but she didn't let fatigue cloud her judgment. Each step was deliberate, from setting up a meeting with the firm's senior executives to reviewing contracts with her legal team. She double-checked everything, knowing that one small mistake could compromise the deal or alert Kojo. At the same time, Alma felt a quiet thrill. This wasn't just about money or business. It was about claiming space for herself, showing that her vision and ability were independent of anyone else's approval. She wasn't seeking revenge or recognition from Kojo. She was proving to herself that she could build something monumental on her own terms. Weeks passed, and the deal began to take shape. The multinational firm expressed interest, impressed by her clarity, preparation, and understanding of the market. Alma smiled quietly each time she closed a call, knowing that she was one step closer to reshaping her business and her life. She felt the fire inside her growing stronger. Every late night, every careful strategy, every call she made in secrecy was leading to a moment where she could finally step fully into her power. And she knew when the time came, no one, including Kojo, would be able to underestimate her again. Kojo was feeling good about himself. He met friends at a trendy cafe in Accra, laughing and leaning back in his chair as he told stories about his marriage. "Alma, she's lucky I married her," he said with a grin, shaking his head as if he had done her the biggest favor in the world. "Not everyone would put up with her, but I support her, help her out, and keep everything running smoothly at home. She depends on me a lot," clearly proud of how generous he believed himself to be. Around him, friends nodded, some laughing along, others quietly impressed by his confidence. Kojo didn't notice the subtle looks exchanged over coffee cups, the slight surprise, the curiosity. To him, the narrative was perfectly clear. He was the responsible, capable one, holding the reins while Alma, charming as she was, leaned on him. In his mind, he controlled everything, from their life at home to how people saw them publicly. Meanwhile, far from the cafe, Alma's assistant moved with quiet efficiency. Contracts were signed, approvals confirmed, and final emails sent to the multinational firm in Lagos. Every detail had been double-checked, every clause verified. Alma had instructed her assistant carefully. No one outside the circle of trusted colleagues could know until the deal was finalized. It was like a chess game, and she had carefully planned each move, while Kojo remained completely unaware of the impending shift. Alma herself was calm, focused, and almost invisible in the process. She had done the hard work months ago, building the strategy, preparing the proposals, and securing the firm's confidence. Now it was the final stage, the quiet execution, the moment where all her careful planning would come together. Every signature, every approval, was another step toward reshaping her business, and by extension, her life. The contrast between the two was striking. Kojo, oblivious and self-assured, believed he held all the power, while Amma, methodical and patient, was quietly rewriting the rules. He boasted about her dependence, laughed about how lucky she was, and thought the story of their lives was entirely his to tell. Yet with every click of the keyboard and every document finalized in secrecy, Amma's influence grew. The balance of power was shifting slowly but surely, and Kojo had no idea. By the time he returned home that evening, still carrying the smug confidence of a man who thought he ran the show, the final pieces were already in place. Amma's plan wasn't visible, but it was unstoppable. The tension was palpable, even if it was invisible to him. Kojo imagined he controlled everything, but the reality was different. Amma had quietly positioned herself to step into a new reality, one where her achievements, independence, and authority would no longer be overlooked. And when that moment came, there would be no going back. Amma woke up early in Abidjan, the city still quiet as the first light of morning touched the skyline. Today was the day, the signing ceremony for the $100 million joint venture she had been working toward in secret. She dressed carefully, choosing a tailored navy suit that fit her perfectly. It wasn't flashy, but it was sharp, professional, and commanding. Every detail mattered: the crisp lines, the subtle jewelry, the polished shoes. She wanted to feel confident, and she did. Before leaving the hotel, her phone buzzed. It was Kojo. "Amma, come have breakfast with me," he said, his tone casual, as if inviting her to share a quiet morning together. In his mind, this was routine, a way to maintain the sense of control he had always assumed he held. To him, mornings like this were still his domain, a place where he could reinforce the familiar dynamic between them. Amma smiled softly, reading his message. She felt no guilt, no hesitation. She typed a polite reply. "Thank you, Kojo, but I have an early engagement this morning. I'll catch up with you later." It was short, simple, and firm. The words carried weight far beyond their length. By declining, she wasn't just skipping breakfast. She was signaling a shift, a quiet but clear assertion of her independence. On her way to the venue, Amma felt a mix of calm and exhilaration. She had prepared for this moment for months, and now everything was coming together. The drive through the streets of Abidjan felt different today. The air seemed charged with possibility. Every honk, every turn, every glance out the window reminded her that she was moving towards something that had always felt just out of reach, a recognition of her own power and worth. At the signing venue, Amma was greeted by executives and staff from the multinational firm. Handshakes were firm, smiles warm, but her presence alone made a statement. She wasn't just a partner in business. She was a force. Calm and composed, she moved through the room with the ease of someone who knew exactly what she had accomplished. The energy shifted around her. People noticed the confidence, the precision, and the quiet authority she carried. As she took her seat at the table, Amma reflected briefly on the journey that had brought her here. The years of being underestimated, the quiet nights of planning, and the determination that never wavered. Kojo's calls, the assumptions, and the dismissals, they all faded into the background. Today, she wasn't answering to anyone. Today, she was claiming her space fully, unapologetically. And as the first papers were handed to her for review, she felt it, the calm certainty that nothing could hold her back now. This morning wasn't just a meeting or a signing. It was a revelation, a declaration that Amma was no longer defined by anyone else's view of her. She was her own authority, and the world was about to see it. The room in Abidjan buzzed with energy as Amma took her seat at the long polished table. Investors from across West Africa and beyond had gathered, cameras lined the walls, and reporters whispered quietly, phones ready. The atmosphere was electric, but Amma remained calm, composed, and utterly focused. This was her moment. Every detail she had planned over the past months had led to this exact point. As the first documents were handed to her, she glanced over them carefully. The numbers were precise, the terms exactly as she had negotiated, and the equity structure gave her firm significant control. A small smile touched her lips. This was more than a financial achievement. It was proof of her vision, her strategy, and her determination. With a firm hand, she signed the first sheet. One by one, the other executives followed, but all eyes kept returning to her. When she signed the final document, the $100 million joint venture was official. Cameras clicked and flashes went off. Reporters murmured, scribbled notes, and began filming short interviews. Within minutes, financial networks across West Africa picked up the story. The headlines spread like wildfire. Amma secures $100 million joint venture, expands consulting empire, and West African entrepreneur redefines leadership in business. Social media lit up with praise, excitement, and admiration. Messages and calls poured in from colleagues, clients, and fellow entrepreneurs congratulating. Meanwhile, across the city in Accra, Kojo sat in his home office, idly flipping through channels. When the story appeared on a financial network, his eyes widened. There she was, Alma, confidently shaking hands with investors, signing papers, and receiving congratulations. The realization hit him hard. He had underestimated her once again. All the assumptions he had made, that she depended on him, that she couldn't operate at this level, crumbled in an instant. And this time it wasn't private. The entire region could see what he had ignored for years. He watched in stunned silence as the camera focused on Alma speaking to reporters. She explained the joint venture, her vision for growth, and her plans to expand her firm's reach. Every word was precise, every gesture calm yet commanding. It wasn't just a business deal, it was a statement. She had claimed her power, and there was no room for doubt or minimization. Back in Abidjan, Alma packed away the last of the signed documents and looked around the room. The energy of the event was exhilarating, but more than that, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This wasn't just about money or contracts. It was about proving, first to herself and now to the world, that her capabilities could never be underestimated again. She had built this, executed it, and now controlled it. The story of her success was no longer quiet or private. It was bold, public, and undeniable. Alma's phone buzzed. Messages of congratulations, excitement, and admiration poured in. And somewhere in Accra, Kojo realized that his assumptions, his control, and his complacency had been illusion. Alma had stepped fully into her power, and nothing would ever diminish it again. That evening, Alma returned to Accra. The city lights twinkled as she entered their apartment, carrying a quiet confidence that Kojo had never seen before. He was in the living room, expecting the usual routine. A casual conversation, maybe a gentle nudge of control, and the familiar dynamic they had fallen into over the years. He didn't notice the change in her energy, but that would become impossible to ignore. Kojo, can we talk? Alma said, her voice calm but firm. There was no anger, no accusation, just a steady clarity that made him pause. He nodded, unsure, and led her to the sofa. She sat down, keeping her posture straight, hands folded lightly in her lap. I want to be honest with you, she began. Over the years, I've worked hard to build my business, to grow my firm, and to prove to myself what I'm capable of. And today, with the $100 million deal, I've done exactly that. I didn't do it for recognition, and I certainly didn't do it for you. I did it for me. Kojo opened his mouth, but she gently raised a hand. Let me finish, she said. I'm no longer your dependent. I am your equal, both in life and in business. I am capable, confident, and in control of my own success. I hope you can see that now. He stared at her, speechless. The words hit harder than any argument or critique ever had. For years, he had assumed he held the power in their relationship, framing her achievements as secondary, attributing her successes to his support, and never fully acknowledging her brilliance. Now he could see it clearly. She didn't need him, and he could not diminish her accomplishments anymore. Alma continued, her tone calm, unwavering. This isn't about revenge, and it isn't about making you feel small. It's about me stepping fully into my power. I've always been here, working, building, and believing in myself, even when you didn't notice. Today, the world has seen it, and you need to recognize it too. Kojo sank back into the sofa, his usual confidence gone. He felt a mixture of humility and shock, forced to reckon with the arrogance that had blinded him for so long. The dynamic had shifted completely. He had thought he controlled the narrative of their lives, but the truth was undeniable. Alma had always been the one driving her own path. Alma reached out briefly, placing a hand lightly on him. I love you, Kojo, but I am not defined by anyone else's view of me. I hope, in time, you can respect that and see me as the equal partner I am. He nodded slowly, words failing him. Silence hung between them, but it was not heavy, it was transformative. The old patterns had ended. For the first time, Alma and Kojo were standing on equal ground, and the balance of power had shifted forever. After the $100 million deal, Alma's life changed in ways she hadn't fully imagined. The news spread quickly across financial networks and media outlets in West Africa. Headlines celebrated her achievement. Alma redefines leadership for women entrepreneurs. $100M deal signals new era in African business, and Alma shows what vision and determination can achieve. Interviews, articles, and social media posts praised her strategy, intelligence, and confidence. She became a symbol, not just of success, but of independence and self-belief. Alma received calls and messages from women across the continent, entrepreneurs, students, and professionals, thanking her for showing that it was possible to succeed on one's own terms. Many shared their own struggles with being underestimated or overlooked, and they saw in Amma a role model who had turned those challenges into triumph. She responded thoughtfully to as many messages as she could, offering encouragement, advice, and inspiration. Each interaction reminded her that her work had meaning far beyond contracts and boardrooms. She was influencing a generation. Her public profile grew rapidly. Conferences invited her as a keynote speaker, business magazines ran feature stories, and TV networks sought her insights on entrepreneurship and leadership. In every interview, she remained composed, articulate, and authentic. She spoke not only about her business achievements, but also about resilience, self-worth, and claiming one's space in a world that often underestimates women. People admired her calm confidence and clarity, the quiet authority that didn't demand attention, but commanded it naturally. Back at home, Kojo watched these developments quietly. He had always measured success in terms he understood: titles, recognition, control. Now he saw Amma receiving the respect and acknowledgement he had never given her. Slowly, he began to change, not through lectures or discussions, but simply by witnessing her power, competence, and independence in action. He realized that words alone could never define her. It was her results, her vision, and her self-assurance that commanded respect. Amma noticed his change too. He became more supportive, more thoughtful, and more willing to listen without imposing his opinion. She didn't need him to approve her actions anymore, but she welcomed the respect he finally gave her. The dynamic between them had shifted completely. Their relationship evolved from one based on dependence and control to one built on equality, mutual recognition, and genuine partnership. Through it all, Amma remained grounded. She continued to focus on her firm, her clients, and the broader impact she could make. Yet she also embraced the larger influence she now held as a public figure. Her story inspired countless women to pursue their ambitions, to trust in their abilities, and to claim their power unapologetically. Amma's transformation was both public and personal. She had not only achieved unprecedented business success, but she had also redefined her identity, her relationships, and the way she was perceived by the world. She had proven that talent, focus, and courage could overcome underestimation. And in doing so, she became a living example of what it means to rise, claim your space, and lead with confidence. Amma stood on the balcony of her apartment in Accra, the city sprawling below her, golden light glinting off the buildings as the sun began to set. She took a deep breath, letting the warm evening air fill her lungs. From this height, the city looked vast and full of possibilities, the same way she felt about her own life now. Every challenge, every doubt, every moment she had been underestimated felt like a stepping stone that had brought her here. She thought back to the mornings of frustration, the nights spent planning in secret, and the years when her brilliance was quietly dismissed. Each obstacle had tested her, but instead of breaking her, it had strengthened her. Every setback had sharpened her focus, honed her strategy, and built a resilience she now carried effortlessly. The $100 million deal, the public recognition, the respect she earned, it wasn't just about business. It was about claiming her worth, proving to herself and the world that she could never be diminished again. Amma smiled, thinking about the women who now looked up to her, the young entrepreneurs who found courage in her story. She felt a quiet pride knowing that her journey could inspire others to fight for their own place, to trust their abilities, and to refuse to be overlooked. As the city lights flickered on, Amma felt a sense of peace and power. She was unstoppable, not because she had achieved wealth or status, but because she had discovered the strength and confidence that had always been inside her. The skyline of Accra stretched before her like a promise: growth, opportunity, and the endless possibilities that come from believing in yourself. For the first time, Amma felt completely free. She knew her achievements, her vision, and her worth were hers alone, and no one could take that away. She was unstoppable, and her journey was only just beginning.